Hello, everybody. This is Here Comes the Spider-Cast number 23, the comic book podcast that reviews Bronze Age Spider-Man comics. This is your co-host, Mike L., and as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be looking at Spider-Man comics from April of 1982. We're going to start off with The Amazing Spider-Man number 227, then move on to Marvel Team Up 116, and then finish things off with Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 65.
That's right. And so starting off, we're finishing up a two-part storyline that started last week, An Amazing Spider-Man featuring the Black Cat. So this is the conclusion of that storyline. It's once again written by Roger Stern and drawn by John Romita Jr. and inked by Jim Mooney. And so I don't know if I was in a different mood this week, but I didn't find this issue as exciting as last week's Amazing Spider-Man.
I thought it was a good second part, but I definitely like the first one better.
Yeah, and it's hard to pin down. I don't know exactly what wasn't quite right, but
I think for me it was the fact that we didn't get a lot of like fun banter between Black Cat and Spider-Man.
Okay.
Like they weren't like, I don't know, they weren't like flirting and like, you know, messing around on rooftops and stuff like that. It was a little bit more like story centric, like they're trying to like make a plot happen with, you know, Peter Parker not trusting Black Cat anymore, and then her eventually dying at the end of the comic. Like it felt like they had an idea and they wanted to get to the end, so they were kind of like, okay, let's make some story up where we can have her die at the end of the comic.
Yeah, that could be it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. It's like that part in the comedy, it's like that part in the Chris Farley movie where the plot tries to happen, and you just want to go back to watching Chris Farley do fun, stupid stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
But they have to introduce Rob Lowe. But anyway, you know, it's like so that's what this is.
No, that completely makes sense for sure.
Yeah, like maybe that's what happened. Yeah, so there's no more fun and games. It's like, okay, now we have to actually make it amount to something. And so basically, we touch base with Spidey. He intervenes on just a kind of a typical bank robbery or a robbery anyway. And then we touch base with Captain Jean DeWolf, his friend on the police force, who is upset at him. Oh, no, sorry, he's upset at her because nothing was mentioned about the Black Cat in this article that the Daily Bugle has posted.
Right, about Spider-Man saving the day.
Right, which was last issue.
Right, and so the police didn't reveal anything to the press about Black Cat being there to help stop the that like party that was going on with the mob bosses, I think it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so then Jean DeWolf says, you know, because you web-headed dope, she's a wanted felon. Have you forgotten that she broke out of a state mental hospital last week? The woman's dangerous. You can't afford to have your name linked with hers. So, I don't know, you know, kind of an interesting premise there.
Yeah, I was actually kind of hooked at this point. Like I think that the banter between her and Spider-Man were pretty good. Peter trying to be that like hard-nosed cop almost. Like the detective that's got a couple of screws loose. Like he just barges in and starts trying to like, you know, intimidate her a little bit and like get this information out of her. I thought it was a pretty good dynamic, and I'm really excited to see more of her.
Yes.
So,
well, she's around for at least a few more years, that's for sure. Yeah, she's a great character. So then Spider-Man kind of goes off on his own to kind of figure out what's going on. He has like a little flashback to some of his previous love interests, including Mary Jane, who we have to point out for those people that, you know, they kind of think of Spider-Man as being Peter and Mary Jane, like the eternal romance. At this point in the comics, Mary Jane is completely absent.
Yeah.
I don't think we've even seen her once since we started this.
No, we haven't in any of the issues we've read.
So basically, we've reviewed 26 weeks, or 23 weeks, right? Does that sound right? No, 23 months. 23 months.
23 months, yeah.
So we've reviewed almost 2 years of Spider-Man comics. 2 years times 3 is, well, who knows how many comics that is? No, but that's like, so what? It's like almost 75 comics, almost.
Right.
There's no sign of Mary Jane in any of these comics. We've got Deborah Whitman. He mentions Marcy Kane, who we've seen a little bit of, I think.
Right. Actually,
in Spectacular this month.
Right. Yeah. In this month we see it. So it seems like, like you're supposed to maybe read the other one first. I don't know. I think that they're released out of order, anyways.
Yes.
But,
Completely. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
But yeah, we see a little bit of her flirting with Peter Parker in the issue of Spectacular Spider-Man from this month. We kind of have a little bit of a romance going on by the end of it. So,
right.
I don't know if that's supposed to be like at the same time he's seeing Black Cat. I guess nothing really happens though, and they're just studying.
Yeah, and plus nothing's official with Black Cat. I think this is sort of just like she just comes and goes, you know?
Right.
And plus he's Spider-Man.
But to me it feels a little bit more official in this one. Like it feels like he's like almost getting ready to reveal his identity to her.
Okay, yeah.
To me at least.
Yeah, you could be right, yep.
Like you can see him kind of like talking about how he genuinely thinks that she's changing and whatnot, and then he was shocked that she's planning this heist, and then that's when he kind of like pulls the mask back down when she asks him to, you know, show his full face.
Yes.
So I feel like if he hadn't caught her planning on stealing this golden statue, he might have actually taken off the mask.
Yeah, that's possibly true. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I've read ahead, so I know sort of what's coming, but I'm not going to spoil anything.
Right.
We'll just leave it as a mystery for now. Mm-hmm. So basically, then Spider-Man goes in to touch base with Black Cat, Felicia Hardy, and they get into this big argument because she had agreed not to do any more jobs, right? But then here she is doing another one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't mind the dialogue so much in this one. I thought that it worked pretty well.
Sure.
The art lends itself to the story as well, I thought.
Yes.
You can... I don't know. His Spider-Man's mask looks... like his eyes don't really change a whole lot in these panels. But you can tell that he goes from like being kind of happy to a little bit unimpressed, and like the slight differences in the line work really shows that he's a little bit angrier.
Yeah, it could also be his body language a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely, in fact, he actually says to her, I don't, where does he say this? I can't really see us being a couple, So it's a little bit like the Batman Catwoman dynamic where he's kind of in love with a criminal, but he's pretty upfront about the fact that he could never be with her. I think because I think Peter Parker's, a little bit more, I don't know what the word is for it, but he's just, I don't want to say naive, but he's more innocent than Bruce Wayne is.
Right.
So he could not imagine being with someone who's like this,
I don't even know if it's naive. I think he's just too by the books. Like he's too much of a hero, where Batman, he himself is a criminal. Like Spider-Man, I'm sure technically is a criminal. Like he's not working with the government or the police to fight crime, but Batman seems a little bit more unhinged and like does kind of, he's like the bad cop to Spider-Man's good cop.
Totally.
Right? So, I can see him kind of pairing up with a criminal a little bit more than Spider-Man.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
But I think that's the fun of it, though. Like she's like the bad girl in high school that you kind of fell for, but you knew it would never really work out. Like you're just too different from that person, and I think the dynamic is just so fun. And Peter Parker's like overconfidence in the Spider-Man suit really helps him and like makes that dynamic work for a little bit. But at the end of the day, Peter Parker's morals kind of outweigh Spider-Man's confidence and arrogance.
Right.
So
absolutely.
It doesn't end up working out.
And then, so then we get some stuff back at Empire State University, and so Peter comes back, and he kind of rubs everybody the wrong way with how cocky he's acting. Then he comes in, and he's basically going to do this assignment. It's due in like like, well, 2 hours. So he finishes it, brings it in, and he, you know, everyone's impressed. And then that's pretty much it. We get a little bit of Deborah Whitman. It's funny because I thought by now she'd be gone, but it's almost like she's been in this stasis for like 5 months of just
and she's like still waiting for Peter Parker to notice him. It's just like, you poor girl, just move on. Mm-hmm. He's such a jerk to you.
Yep.
Yeah. So then after that, we see Black Cat. She actually does go and sneak out to steal this golden statue with this like red, of this guy holding a red gem. It's kind of a goofy looking statue. I'm wondering if that's like, if the statue itself plays any significant, like has any significance later on, because it feels like such a specific looking statue.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but it could be. But I don't know. And the problem is I mean, I do love this art, but the problem with the way the statue's drawn is there's no way to distinguish it from all the other objects in the room. So it almost just looks like a guy who's just colored yellow. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no real difference in the texture or anything like that.
Maybe that's what it is. It just it didn't like stand out enough from everything else.
Right.
And even the face kind of looks like too specific of a person.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like a generic like statue looking face. So
exactly.
I was kind of thinking like, oh, is this like a statue of a person that we are supposed to know, or maybe like somebody that's going to show up later? But we don't see that in this issue. But Spider-Man shows up to the museum and stops Black Cat because he notices that the plans were all spread out on her kitchen table, so he knows that she's up to no good. So,
go ahead. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was gonna say. So then, basically, then the mobsters or whatever are sort of they sort of catch them in the act, and and they start shooting at them. So then we get this big shootout / fist fight. That's all good stuff.
Yeah.
But then basically Black Cat has kind of escaped and is walking on this tightrope. Then Spider-Man swings by to sort of confront her. They're arguing back and forth, and then we get this weird scene with this guy on a motorcycle, and she ends up knocking him off his motorcycle and then stealing his bike, and then Spider-Man's chasing after him. And then we get kind of this scene I think was intended to recall the infamous death of Gwen Stacy.
Right.
Which I'm sure I don't know if you've read it, but you're familiar with the details,
yeah,
right?
I've read it as well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I believe that's what this is supposed to be, where Spider-Man is trying to, in this case, not stop her, or not rescue her, but stop her. And so he shoots his web, it stops the bike, but then she keeps flying. And the idea is that he might have unintentionally killed her, but thankfully he doesn't. So she ends up running away. Then he tries to catch her with this web, but then she ends up rolling off this dock and falling into the river. Spider-Man dives in after her to look for her, but he can't find her. So she's supposedly dead, right?
Yeah.
And then the cops come, and they actually, they realize that Spidey might be upset, so they kind of leave him to him. They leave him alone. Or no, actually, it's Jean DeWolf that leaves him alone.
The captain shows up, and she reveals to Spider-Man that she didn't call the cops on Black Cat, but she called the DA to exonerate her for all of her crimes.
Right.
So she says something like, if she was only a couple of hours early, maybe this whole thing could have been stopped.
Right. And then he sort of just, and then I actually really like the last 3 panels where we see the shot of Spider-Man taking the papers and sort of just tossing them into the river. But the last shot is like a big shot of the New York skyline with Spider-Man sitting there, and it's kind of just, it's almost like zooming out a little bit, and we just see the paper falling into the river. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So I really like that. So overall, again, a good issue, just not quite as exciting as last week's.
Yeah, not as strong, but I think it's still a recommend for me. Like, I really highly recommended the previous one, and I feel like this is a good next issue, and it continues the story. It definitely continues the story in a satisfying way, but I just don't think it was as successful as the other one. So I recommend it.
Right. I recommend it too, definitely. And I always like Black Cat. I think she's a great character. Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely recommend that issue. So now we move on to Marvel Team Up with Spider-Man and Valkyrie. That
Oh
is pronounced.
boy.
Yeah, you know what? I'm at the point where, as we're talking about this comic, I'm gonna look ahead and I want to find out when J.M. DeMatteis is done with his series, because I'm again just not enjoying anything he's doing here. What about you?
No, not even a little bit. Like, it's getting harder and harder to point stuff out that I like about the comic,
Right.
because I think it's just because it's been so long that we've been reading these like kind of crappy stories.
Yeah.
If this was the first issue of Marvel Team Up that we read, I don't think I would dislike it as much.
Right.
But it's just that it's like getting to the point where I'm like, I need some good Marvel Team Up stories. This is getting tough.
Well, the good news is we're at number 116, and he only writes until 133. So,
okay. A couple more weeks for us, but
yeah, exactly.
I guess
anyway,
something
okay,
to look
so,
forward to.
Yeah. Okay, so do you wanna tell us about this one
Yeah. So we have
as best you can?
It's a little bit of a continuation from the from the previous issue. We have
Right.
Valkyrie. Her mind is kind of being taken over by the spirits of the two aliens from the previous issue who are trapped in her sword. And they're making her go crazy and want to kill Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. So she chases Spider-Man, and they're fighting. Thor sees them on the news and goes and tries to like stop them. They have a little moment. Spider-Man steals the sword and starts flying away. I don't understand why he doesn't turn evil.
I don't know.
As well? Like, why is it that only when Valkyrie holds the sword she's evil, but when Spider-Man holds it, he's fine? Anyways, Thor smashes the hammer and everything's fine at the end. Like, that's the resolution.
That's it.
That's the entire comic. I don't think anything else literally happens. Like, it's...
No, but it's funny, though, because despite the fact that nothing happens, there's a lot to sludge through.
Yeah.
Like, once again, it's just... And again, it's not bad. It's just that it's not good. It's just you're trudging through all this description and dialogue and this stupid plot line from last issue. I don't know. This whole alien thing is just ridiculous. And not to say that it couldn't be good. Like, not to say that it couldn't have been done in a better way, but just the way that it's handled is really poorly done, I think, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And sorry, go ahead.
I think that, like, if they would have set up the aliens to like have the ability to possess other beings or things, it would have made a little bit more sense. Like,
right.
we see them transform and like morph into humans. We don't see them like take anything over. So like, it'd be kind of cool if maybe they were taking over other people, like taking over bodies and like possessing things, because then this could possibly make more sense.
Right.
Like, I don't know. Instead of being the sword, they're just taking over Valkyrie.
Right.
I don't know. It's just something to make it a little bit more interesting, or like have an actual story going on.
Yes. And see, like he tries to add some humor near the end with Spider-Man. The sword is sort of pulling him along through the air, and then as Valkyrie and Thor are talking to each other and about to kiss on the rooftop, you see Spider-Man flying around in the background. And it's kind of like, I give it props for at least trying to be funny, but it wasn't really that funny.
No.
But, at all.
I think I actually kind of liked the line, I think Spider-Man says something like, or Spider-Man while he's flying through the air is screaming for Thor and Valkyrie, and then when Thor notices, he says something like, "Oh, Spider-Man, the sword's evil. Why didn't you say that from the beginning?" I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that I guess the whole bit of him flying through the air was worth that one kind of small little joke, but yeah, I don't know. I think it would have been a lot cooler if Spider-Man turned evil too. Like,
sure.
Like having them, have to like having Thor and Valkyrie had team up against Spider-Man would have been really fun.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, it's like all the elements are there, but I don't know. I just don't know what they're really thinking or what he's thinking, J.M. DeMatteis,
Right.
I don't know. Again, it's like it's all these elements, and it's almost like he's spending all his time on the wrong things and all of his effort on the wrong things, and he just doesn't know how to zero in and focus it on what's good and what's important.
You know what it feels like to me? It's like all of the other writers are trying to create good stories for everybody to enjoy. And it feels like this is like, okay, what do we have to add into this comic for the kids to love it?
Yeah, maybe.
Because it's just like goofy. Like even when it is a little bit more serious, like the tone is always like weirdly like simple and
sure.
like has all these different things. Like, okay, we have to have the two heroes fighting. We have to have a lot of goofs and weird things happening, like Spider-Man flying around or Thor not noticing him and kissing Valkyrie, and even earlier some of the stuff with Valkyrie, like her turning evil, like even looks a little bit goofy and doesn't look as sinister as I think that they wanted it to be.
You know what? I don't know. I don't know. I think as far as the art goes, I'm going to have to say I place a lot of the blame on Mike Esposito, only because I believe, and I'm going to double check this, but I believe he used to be an old Jack Kirby inker, and I love Jack Kirby, but I think he's making this a little bit too Silver Agey, and it doesn't quite fit the style of the comic.
Right.
That I don't know. That's my theory anyway about this. Because again, I know he's a good inker, and I know that Jim Mooney's not Jim Mooney. Herb Trimpe is a great artist. Yeah. So, but it's just not clicking, and so that's my only explanation I can think of. It looks too retro for what the script is, and it just doesn't gel.
Yeah.
Whereas the other artists on this month's books do gel, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Oh, okay. What did you think of the Wong cameo?
That was just I don't know, unnecessary. I thought. I don't know. Like, just why even throw that in there?
Yeah.
Pointless.
I guess it was to like I don't know. It was for a joke. Like, there's no other reason but to have him kind of show up in in his robe and.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, Doctor Strange isn't around, but like, aren't you also a sorcerer?
No, actually, he's not.
Oh, okay.
As far as I know, because I'm reading Doctor Strange by Steve Englehart right now. As far as I know, Wong doesn't actually have any powers, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay.
I'm definitely not a Doctor Strange expert.
Okay.
So I don't know, but I don't think he does have any powers.
Okay.
But no, yeah, it's just whenever you go and try to, recruit a character and then they turn you down, you got to wonder why this scene is even included in the book, right? In any story. So,
yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like, maybe if Valkyrie had even said a one-off line, like, I knew that you would be looking for somebody who can match my, like, wit or, like, strength or something like that, or somebody who could overpower me with this. Doctor Strange is like, I don't know, like name off any Doctor Strange item. Like the Wands of Watum is the only thing that could overpower me. So I knew to come find you here. Something. Yeah. There's really nothing.
Well, the only thing I can think of from the point of view of J.M. DeMatteis is that he is or was at one point the writer of Defenders, and Valkyrie was a member, and so was Doctor Strange. So maybe it was just a way to get a cameo in from one of his,
that's true,
pet characters. That could be it. So. But anyway, so yeah, once again, this is a comic I'm probably never going to read again.
No.
So I don't really... it's not bad. I just don't recommend it.
Yeah. Hey, you know what, though? I will say, I think that... I think the art was a little bit better in this one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't... There weren't any, like, glaring panels where I was like, woof, what is going on here? Like, it was pretty solid, I thought.
Okay.
There wasn't... I mean... it was solid for Herb Trimpe in his like track record that we've
I just
had
hope
with
one
Marvel
day Yeah, I just hope one day we see some good. I want you to see some good Herb Trimpe artwork because he actually is a really good artist.
Right.
So yeah, well, we'll see if that day ever comes though.
Yeah, but
Anyway, okay.
I think that there is some great stuff in here by Herb Trimpe. So
Yeah.
I was pleasantly
All right.
surprised by this issue.
All right, so now we're gonna. So both not really recommended by either one of us then.
No.
Okay,
not
so
really.
let's move on.
Okay.
Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, featuring Kraven the Hunter.
Right.
Now, again, I don't know if I'm just having a bad week, but go ahead.
I was going to ask you what you thought about the cover.
Well, let's just say I did not like this issue of Spectacular as much as last week's, and the cover is not great.
It's awful.
I
hate this hideous Kraven face.
I don't hate it, but it's not good. Like, I believe I'm going to double check this, but I think it looks like Bob Layton has signed it, and he's a decent artist, but not my favorite.
Yeah, and so I obviously looked at the cover before reading the comic and thought, this is awful. Like, why does Kraven look like this? This looks...
Right.
It looks just like horribly drawn. And then later on, we realized that Spider-Man has been like hit with a tranquilizer dart and is kind of like seeing things and like...
Right.
It's like amplifying his fear, I guess. So everything's kind of turning wonky and coming to life. And this is what Kraven looks like to him. So that's fine and it works for me in the comic, but it's just such a weird pull for the cover.
Yeah. It's not a great cover, that's for sure.
No, I think that even having the street come to life would be cooler than Kraven, like the ugly Kraven. Mm-hmm. Like with the lampposts turning into snakes and the bus turning into this huge monster. Like that would have been kind of a cooler, intriguing cover for me than this one. Yeah, it's definitely like I don't hate it as much as you, but it's definitely not my favorite. I don't think it's a good well drawn at all. No. And I also got to point out the interior of this month is by guest artist Bob Hall, who I actually interviewed last year. He's a great guy. Yeah, he did some really good work on Squadron Supreme, but as far as I know, he was never a huge artist at Marvel, but he did go on to work on Shadow Man at Valiant Comics. Okay.
So he's kind of just like I guess you could say, I don't want to say a house style artist, but he's kind of just a standard Marvel artist of this day, but he definitely did some good work. This artwork, I think, to me, suffers a little bit because I'm comparing it to Ed Hannigan's work last month or last week. You remember how much we were raving about that? Yeah. So it's definitely not as good as Ed Hannigan's work, but it still fits with the style that we've seen in Spectacular lately. So I think it's decent.
Yeah, and I think it fits with the story as well. This, like having Kraven come in, he's a little bit more of a classic Spider-Man villain. So and the story feels a little bit more like back to normal, especially after the Cloak and Dagger serious story with a little bit more of a darker tone. This one kind of gets a little bit more lighthearted, and I think that the style definitely lends itself to the story.
Right, and this is also the second time that we've come across Kraven in our podcast because he was in a Denny O'Neil story, which was garbage, which was terrible. Right. And so this one is definitely a marked improvement on that. Although I got to say, I want to love Kraven because I love Fearful Symmetry and I love / Kraven's Last Hunt. Right. But I'm still not sure how much I like Kraven as a character and how interesting I think his, Calypso and all that. I don't know. I just don't know if I really like that whole.
I'm not sure how I feel about Calypso either. Their dynamic seems very weird. She doesn't have much of a character. So I don't think that she adds anything to Kraven besides the fact that he's no longer monologuing and now he's having a dialogue with somebody. You know what I mean? There's it feels like really that's her entire purpose. I mean, I guess in this story she has a little bit more of a purpose, but that's it's very minor. It could have been anybody. The character could have been anybody and written anyway. She herself doesn't really add much to the story. I guess I'll just describe it real quick. We see Kraven practicing hunting humans so he can go and find Spider-Man, and he finally does run into him and starts fighting him and eventually bests him until he realizes that Calypso helped him out and shot Spider-Man with a like a tranquilizer, like hallucinogenic dart, so he was kind of off his game. So Kraven pretty much lets him go, I believe, because it wasn't a fair fight, and that's kind of Kraven's deal, is that he can't. He the reason why he's like he really wants to kill Spider-Man is because he sees Spider-Man as his equal, and like wants to have that like one last big hunt with this like creature or human that's just like him and as powerful as him. It's about the game and not necessarily like any malicious intent towards Spider-Man himself. It kind of grew from just wanting to have fun and like win and be the best.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing: is there's a lot of fighting in this issue, like a lot of pages dedicated to the fight scene. But before we get to the ending of the plot, I just want to mention that we do have a quick scene of Peter getting sort of in trouble from what is this?
The dean, I believe.
Yeah. Who's basically suggesting that he that he quit his job as a teaching assistant because his grades are failing, and then we get a scene of him touching base with Deborah Whitman, right? And again, it seems to be a different Deborah Whitman than we see in the other comics, so it's a little bit not off-putting, but it's kind of hard to pin down exactly where in the chronology this is. But the weird thing about this issue is that while Deborah is sort of kind of moping around a little bit about the way that Peter's treating her, this other girl, what's her name? Marcy Kane, is kind of like, well, you know what, Peter, wait up. I'm going to go. I like this. So this is Marcy walking along with Deborah. And then Marcy's kind of, I think Peter's in trouble over studies. I'm just a secretary, so he seems to think his problems are far beyond my comprehension. And then Marcy's like, well, that's not they're not beyond my comprehension. I'm here on a science scholarship too. Peter, wait, I'd like to talk to you. So then she runs up to him, and then they leave Deborah in the dust. Poor Deborah Whitman again,
I know. This panel on the original page 5, so digital 6, with Deborah just kind of sadly looking over her shoulder at them walking away is heartbreaking. Like, she doesn't have any like thought bubbles. She doesn't say anything. It's just this look at them as they're walking away, like planning this like study dinner date. And it really does suck. I mean, even earlier, like it does feel like such a different relationship in every single comic.
Right.
Like before Spider, like I think just in Amazing, he was talking about how Deborah seems nice, but I don't know, she doesn't like, she keeps dating this goofball. And then in this one, he feels a little bit more like sympathetic, like, like, oh man, I really like her, but she's dating somebody else. It'll never work. I wish I could really tell her how I feel about her. And then Deb's like, I wish that he would just open up, and I don't know. It's so different from earlier on when Peter Parker's like completely ditching her and like, sorry, don't have time to save you or your uncle. Bye.
Yeah,
like,
which was Denny O'Neil. Yeah.
So it really, I feel so bad for this character, and also like how she's written. Even I feel bad because I feel like she could be a fun character. Right. We definitely don't get that.
So no. And then before we get back to the fight scene, I just want to point out that at the very last page, after the fight has wrapped up, we get a scene of Peter. He goes back to reconvene with Marcy to go study with her, but when she answers the door, she's wearing an extremely revealing shirt.
Yeah.
And she's like, and Peter's like, hi, Marcy, I'm here to study. We will study, Peter, later, but I thought you might be hungry. So why don't we just eat in? And then it's like, well, I know what's gonna happen here.
Yeah.
Which is again, because we've been following Deborah Whitman along this whole time, I still feel sorry for her. It's just because it's just like through circumstance, she just seems to always be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or say the wrong thing at the wrong time. Poor girl. Anyway,
it's also, I feel like this scene is especially weird paired with the Black Cat comic.
Yeah, you're right. But again, two different writers, it doesn't quite jive up, right? Like there's no acknowledgement of Black Cat in this story, right?
Yeah, like it feels so weird that Peter is so like ready to go and like fool around with this girl, presumably like she's like showing up at the door like in revealing clothing and kind of being like sly about going and studying. Like they're hinting at a relationship here, and Peter seems to be into it, and it just feels so weird when he's kind of like in a relationship with Black Cat at this time. And like
right,
even in the Amazing issue they're talking about Marcy, like, oh yeah, Marcy, I don't really know where her head's at. It's like, really, you don't know where her head's at?
Yeah,
after something like this, it's like, I don't know.
Well, that's definitely probably in reaction to previous issues that she's been around, not this issue.
Maybe, yeah. Assuming that this like takes place, is supposed to take place afterwards.
I really don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But you were also saying before, like sometimes the timeline is very different. Where like Peter Parker, like Spectacular Spider-Man, takes place a lot, like way after a lot of the issues of Amazing and stuff like that. So who knows even where this is?
Like in the late 80s, I remember they published a reading order, and it would be like you have to read 4 issues of Spectacular in a row, then 3 issues of Web, then 5 issues of Amazing. So there was really no way to keep it perfectly straight at the time.
Right.
So yeah, I guess it's just an approximation, which is fine, but it does make it a little bit jarring when you're reading it all at once.
Yeah, for sure. And I assume that like that reading order was a reaction to the fact that the stories weren't always matching up, so they had to kind of retcon that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like that seems like to me that seems to be like the most logical conclusion for why they would do something like that. Like they released these 3 issues and then they realized that they don't quite match up, so then afterwards they're like, okay, read these ones, then read these ones. Yeah. So that way the story makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like fixing it in post.
Yeah.
Basically. I also want to point out, all along, I love Jim Mooney because of his history with Superman, but the fact is he's now inking 2 Spider-Man books per month, and I don't think, especially in this issue, I don't think his inks are working with Bob Hall at all. Right. I just don't think they're great, and I'd have to double check next week to see if it's also just as poor with Ed Hannigan, but I don't know. I think that the art would have looked a lot better with a different inker. What do you think?
Yeah, it didn't pop out to me.
Right. Yeah, it's not bad. It fits with the previous style, but it's not great.
Right.
And the other thing too is, I do think Bob Hall's a great artist because I've seen him do good stuff, but I don't think any particular panel stands out in this issue.
No.
Like the storytelling's decent, but it's not spectacular.
Yeah,
and
there were no panels where I like stopped and was like, "Well, I need to like look at this and kind of take this all in because it was so good."
Right, it's kind of just more standard.
Yeah,
it's like there's nothing bad about it, but nothing great.
Yeah, it does its job for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing. Again, I'm not sure how much I enjoy the dynamic of Kraven and Calypso and Spider-Man. So this issue was definitely not as good as last week's issue of Spectacular. So it's still decent. I still recommend it. Of the 3 comics this month, this one might be my favorite. I'm not sure between this and the Amazing issue. What do you think?
I think that Amazing, I liked Amazing a little bit better.
Okay.
This one was a little bit more of like a lukewarm recommend.
Sure.
I think there's definitely more to take away from the Amazing issue. Like the art and some of the panels there alone. I think the story was pretty on par. Like even maybe Amazing was a little bit better for me.
Yeah.
But if we're saying that the story's on par, I think that the art and some of the panel layouts and how they told the story through the art in Amazing was better than Spectacular this week. So I think that Amazing would be my favorite.
Okay. So yeah, overall this week, not quite as good as last week. Last week's picks were definitely, it was a standout bunch.
Oh, they were great.
Yeah. So next week we will be reviewing Amazing Spider-Man 228 with a fill-in story by Jan Stranad, who I've never heard of. So let's cross our fingers for that one. Then we've got Spectacular Spider-Man with Electro featuring a classic cover by Ed Hannigan. And Marvel Team Up will be featuring none other than Wolverine. So I'm really looking forward to that.
That'll be fun, yeah.
Yeah, so that's it for this week. Josh, you can take it from here.
All right. You guys can check us out at the Comic Syndicate on Twitter and at the Comic Book Syndicate on Facebook. If you guys are trying to find us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like that, we'll be under the Comic Syndicate grouping. So if you look up Comic Syndicate, you'll find us through there, and it'll be
Comic Book Syndicate.
Sorry, Comic Book Syndicate. Sorry.
Yeah.
And you'll see the Here Comes the Spider Cast podcast mixed in with the Quasar Chronology and Flea Market Fantasy. And if you guys want to leave us a review there or tweet at us or send us a message on Facebook, we'd love to hear back from you. We want to know what you guys think about the podcast itself and also the comics that we're reading. So let's keep that conversation going.
All right, so that wraps it up for this week. Until next Monday, this has been Here Comes the Spider Cast.
All right, see you then.